guys, welcome to this video. So this time we will be looking into how to get your first Vermin Swarm beginner army for a budget of less than 150 euros. It's been a challenge because Vermin Swarm has generally a lot of models in the army, being, well, a horde army more or less. Well, first of all, this is the builder that most of the people that play 9th Age use. So it's called New Recruit. You can find it online. You can even install it on your phone. And then, well, basically you can create any army with New Recruit. There's also a premium version for some extra added benefits. But making an army is quite easy. You can just select different units. So for example, I can just take any of the special options for Vermin Swarm, create the unit, give the upgrades that I want. And then I can also still just remove the unit again afterwards. Well, with this, we made an army, and then I can show you a condensed version of it. So what will we have in the army? We will have a general senator who's basically there for the discipline. We have some magic in the form of 2 swarm priests. We have the Bloodfur legate with the hand weapon and the secrets of the Doomblade. This is basically a very iconic model for Vermin Swarm, and I would highly suggest to play around with it at least a couple of times to see if you like it. And then for the core, we have 2 big blocks of infantry. We have the Black Furs, which are your elite infantry, and the Vermin Legionnaires, which are your standard infantry more or less. You have some V-Lights with bows for some range damage. You have Plague Disciples in special. These guys are also quite fun. Maybe not for your opponent, but that's the idea of the game, right? And then we have some larger stuff in the Momillo Brutes and the Arena Beast, and the Shadowfur Stalkers are there to support your lines with some skirmishing action. They can also shoot a bit. So basically I think this is quite a balanced list for Vermin Swarm at 3k. It will give you the opportunity to learn a couple of aspects of the game. You will have some magic, you will have some shooting, but most of your damage is probably going to happen in close combat in the end. I think it's a nice list to get started, and I would highly suggest using something like this. Also, the Black Fur Veterans and the Vermin Legionnaires, most notably, are going to be quite useful if you step up in some higher point values, because you will need some stuff to fill out your core points. Now, if you look at this list, then in total you're looking at 150 infantry models more or less, some big stuff, and an Arena Beast, which is even bigger. If you have to pay like €1 per model, then you're already over the 150 euro for the entire army. So it was quite a struggle to find something to represent this. And well, the fluff for Vermin Swarm is heavily based on Roman legions. So I thought, well, you can also just take some Roman Legionnaires for this. So the Black Furs will be Legionnaires, the Legionnaires will be Legionnaires. You have the Auxiliaries or the V-Lights in the Roman army. Then the Plague Disciples, well, they are basically just very savage versions of Roman time troops. So I thought, well, you can just go to Italeri and knock your army together, basically. So what does Italeri have? They have 1 on 72 scale historic figures. Generally, they're a little bit smaller than the 28mm heroic scale that is often used in fantasy wargaming. However, if you make your entire army from these type of models, then nobody will note, or well, you won't see it in the army itself. And you have some excellent choices here, basically in terms of cost efficiency. There's also alternatives like Hill Caesar, Plastic Soldier Company, stuff like that. However, the price that Italeri is offering, you cannot compete against it with any other company. So they have, for the Roman period, they have a couple of different choices. The cavalry is going to be not that useful. However, the other choices are going to be quite useful. So we'll just go through them. We have the Roman Late Imperial Legion. So this set mostly contains guys with round shields and some spears and some bows. As you can see, the models, you have 3 sprues with similar pose models. Now, these models, they are 36 figures and they are like €10.50. So you shouldn't expect too much from them. Other than just being decent models to put on the table. I can see if I can zoom in a bit. So you have your models, the moment pose models. Well, you're gonna only have 3 of each of these poses, so I think it's gonna be fine. You have a couple of bows to form your V-Light units, so there's 6 of them in this box. And then otherwise these you would be using as your legionnaires. And then we go to the next one. We have the Roman First Century. I was saying that you were using it as legionnaires. I have to remind myself how I did this in the setup. But basically this one is another box of infantry with a lot of different options there. So you have basically an entire unit of close combat infantry here. You would also get this box, and then the third box you get is the Roman Infantry Caesar's Wars. These will be your black fur elite infantry. There's also a couple of bows in there to round out your V-Lights. So I was counting it out, and basically with the standard, with the Roman infantry, the Caesar's Wars, you can make your black furs. And then the Vermin Legionnaires, you will use the 1st century BC models for that with these round shields. And then you still need the V-Lights and the Shadowfur Stalkers. So the V-Lights are going to be used, are going to be the models with the bows. And then the Shadowfur Stalkers, I was imagining that you could use these models, which are the late Imperial Legion that I was talking about before, because these have like the javelin type spears. So I could imagine that they just throw their javelins as throwing weapons, and then you have the Shadowfur Stalkers. So basically for this lump of infantry with the Shadowfurs we are paying 30 euros. And then they also have Gaul infantry. Team-wise, I think it fits perfectly with the Romans. So you could imagine that they are either captured slaves, if you want to field some vermin slaves later during list progression, or you can play them as the fanatical plague disciples, or plague disciples, yes. So these will be your plague disciples, and then one box just fills you out for a unit of 40 plague disciples for 10 euros, which is also a very decent price point, I would say. So with that we have covered all of the infantry except for the Mamilla Brutes, the Arena Beast, and then the characters. Well, I would for the characters just take a couple of models from the different boxes that you have lying around if you take the 4 of them. And then you still need the Mamillos and the Arena Beast. So far we've spent about 40 euros on the list, which is very cheap considering the amount of models you get. So we can spend a little bit more on the Mamilla Brutes and the Arena Beast. So for the Mamilla Brutes, there's a couple of options. One of the options is to go to Lubart miniatures. They either give you printable files or they give you the printed models. If you want to go for the printed models, they have 3 Mamilla Brutes for 48 euros. And then I believe you can have all the weapon options that are available. So fun thing about these is that they are very heavily Roman inspired, so they will go quite great with Roman infantry. And yeah, they have all kinds of different weapon options. I think these are really decent models for the Mamillos. And then they also have an Abomination at Lubart Miniatures, which looks like an abomination, to be sure. Well, alternatively, you can find a lot of different models online nowadays. Lubart is one example. You can also go for the more accessible Games Workshop. So they have the Storm Fiends that would normally be used for Mamilla Brutes, with also all kinds of different weapon options. They're a little bit less Roman Legion inspired, but they can be kick-ass models as well. And then we have the Helpet Abomination from Games Workshop. So style-wise, I think I would go with one of the sets. Like if you take your Helpet from Games Workshop, I would also take the Storm Fiends from Games Workshop, and same with the stuff from Lubart Miniatures. And then in the end, you will have your 3000 point army for less than 150 euros. If we want to look how this looks on the table, you can go to Warhall. Warhall is quite a nice software for beginners and also for just tournament players, basically, to just face off against anyone in the world, where you can just create any army. So you can just go to unit, you pick the army that you want to play, and then you can make units for that army. And then, well, first off, you get a bit of an impression of how big your list is compared to the table size. And you can also play around with your list. You can just move your units. You can do any kind of fancy stuff with the list. And as I said, you can just practice against online opponents. So I would definitely give it a go before I would commit to an army to just play the list once or twice. You can also go for alternative options like paper models or anything else. But it's generally a good idea to test the list a little bit at least before you commit into buying a lot of models. So that's going to be it for Vermin Swarm. I think it's quite a decent list for the size format, and I think that with the Roman infantry you can really build an impressive army to behold on the table. Thank you for watching, and I will see you the next time.